Hi, Kathy. Thanks for helping with my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Kathy Kelso. I am currently retired. My background is in project management, but I have not been working for many years. Right now, I'm in Minnesota with the snow today, and I do a lot of work. One of my hobbies right now is working on genealogy, and I'm part of a book club, and I'm still volunteering at the church.
What kind of books does your book club cover?
Right now we're reading the Honey Bee. That's the current book.
Oh, wow.
It's a neighborhood book club. It just kind of started off. So this is only the second book that we've read. So
That sounds fun. It's always nice to have something more than talk about than the weather or the latest news headline or something.
right. And well, and our neighborhood is quite a close neighborhood. So we live in an area of about somewhere 20 to 30 houses, kind of in this one section. And most people know each other. So it's always nice.
And I guess each month a different person picks a book, or maybe too early to
Yes,
tell.
yes. And of course, different houses, we deal with the technology issues that can happen, as people do or know Zoom or don't know Zoom.
Oh, do you all do the book club over Zoom?
Some of us still do. It's still hard to understand who's vaccinated and who's not, and that exposure level. So some of us are doing it over Zoom, and I have a monthly Zoom call with my family. So Zoom is a regular thing in this house.
That's unfortunately true in our world too. Doing usually not for family though. However, I got to tell you, I was supposed to be in South Africa right now for my niece's wedding,
Oh,
and so we ended up having to do that over Zoom. So
well, and you were just in Mexico, I believe.
I'm actually back in Mexico, if you can believe that.
Oh. So what are you doing there?
Well, my son came down here just to check it out, and then my wife came down here to make sure my son was okay, and then we came down here because my wife was down here. So
Well, and in these days you can work from anywhere.
absolutely. And the last week of the year is off pretty much for most people. So that's good.
When I always tell people, that telecommuting pendulum, in 2014, they were making everybody go back into the office, which is one of the reasons why there were a lot of people leaving HP at the time. And so now, that pendulum is swung the other way. Everybody's at home, and I fully expect it will swing at some point.
I
But
know Mark Hurd was pretty much, there needs to be a good reason for us to have a dedicated office space for you. Otherwise, you need to work from home. And then Meg Whitman's like, we want everybody in the office. It's just kind of funny. So did you know that NASA was planning to send people back to the moon again for the first time since 1972?
well, what I've been doing is I've read some of the things that you've posted on LinkedIn. So I've seen it from that perspective. And of course, my husband, believe it or not, flies high-powered rockets.
Oh, wow.
So he builds them from scratch. He started off with kits, but now they're in from scratch. And so he's part of this world that's really interested in, like, the telescope that just lifted off. Things that are flying up into the space area. He monitors quite a bit.
So have you seen some of his rocket launches?
Oh yes, they're great fun to go watch. There's a couple YouTube videos of him. He's got a group of guys, and he's part of a club. And so a group of guys got together and built the largest rocket in Minnesota, and then launched that. And he also has some altitude records, and the University of Minnesota comes out and launches that on their site. So, and he's been teaching some college kids as well. So
I guess what's the highest he's gotten a rocket?
I think around 4,000, 5,000 feet.
Okay. And does he do things around with like payloads? Like cameras and sensors and that type of thing?
Well, there's electronics like the altimeters and things like that. And of course they build them with GPS now so that because it's not successful if you doesn't come down and you can't find it. So it has a bunch of electronics in it, and there are putting cameras in some of them, but in Minnesota you have to get waivers from the FAA, and so I think they have like a 10,000-foot waiver when they launch. So sometimes there's a group of people, and it's international, I understand. They go out to the desert during the summer and they'll launch there, and they'll have a higher clearance then to go as high as they want.
Wow,
So,
that's really interesting. How long has you been into this?
oh, well, it kind of started off with in like when we have two kids, and in middle school, they built tiny little rockets in science and then would launch them. Well, he took a look at that and said, well, there's got to be a big boy plan to this. And so he's been doing it at least, I would say, 10 years. So we
I
have
had,
three rockets hanging in our garage. They're too big to fit in the house. So
is it all solid propellant, or has he experimented with liquid propellant?
well, there's a guy in the club that mixes his own rockets, but most of what my husband buys are commercial. I mean, there's guys that sell rocket fuel, and it comes in a big tube. I think it's granular is what it is, a form of black powder.
Oh, okay. That's fascinating. I would have never known that if we hadn't been having this discussion.
Well, and there's clubs everywhere. Whenever we were out to Boston to visit my daughter, and so he was looking for rocket launches all the way out, so that maybe we could stop and see one of somebody else's. So
So about us going to the moon, it sounds like it might be something at least your husband would be interested in. But what do you think about it?
I waffle on it because I read your article, and I think the statement that really got me, which is true, is we need to look to the future, but we can't, we also still need to deal with the processes and problems we have here on home. So, from a scientific perspective, I like the idea of going to the moon. I like the research. I like the new learnings. And I do agree that it needs to be for the many and not the few. But right now, the way, with these launches and the big bucks that are behind them, it somewhat seems, it's turning into a rich man's game. I'll put it that way, a very rich man's game.
There's definitely a lot of very rich people doing this, but I guess I wonder. It seems like them spending the money going to space and doing rocketry hits a nerve that building a big yacht or buying an island doesn't seem to have the same type of impact. I was wondering if
Right.
that's true in your point
Well,
of
and I'd
view.
rather
Or...
much watch the things coming out of NASA and, the scientific and, things like the telescope, for example, which is way cool, rather than watching Bezos launch something. There's more research and technology, and I think more learnings there than just the fact that these people can go into space and come back.
Yeah, but I know a lot of people are like, see that as being a waste of money and kind of like, what is it, conspicuous consumption or something like that. But these same people buy like these very expensive private aircraft and jet around the world, and buy islands and buy personalized submarines, and I don't. And there's a lot of rich people that do that, but don't make the headlines. I was just wondering why. I mean, is that a more acceptable way for a rich person to spend their money?
Well, okay, so no, because I firmly believe that we have a wealth inequity on this world. And, the fact that people are paid, how many millions and millions of dollars does a one person need? And so I think, we're not hearing, and of course it's somewhat the media and stuff, but we're not hearing enough about what they're doing to help others in this world. we hear about Bill Gates and his vaccination programs and things like that, but all these other people, we're not hearing that they're, helping, humanity on this world.
Yeah. And I guess you got different ways to help humanity. I mean, like Thomas Edison, for example, arguably, inventing the light bulb really changed humanity. And, every time I flip a light switch, I'm just kind of imagine what it was like before we had electricity and how dark it was. And,
Mm-hmm.
that story in the Bible about Rachel and Leah, so somebody that has light switches, that story makes no sense whatsoever.
Right. And so that's why we're not hearing about the technology pieces of what's coming out of these trips. It's all for show, and there's nothing. And yes, I'm sure there's science behind what they're doing, but I don't know where that science is being leveraged, that technology is being leveraged, or what learning's coming out of it.
Well, I have a question. In terms of like the future of humanity, what do you envision? I mean, like 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 years from now, where do you think humanity is going, or where should it go? I mean, I've realized those are two distinct questions. Maybe we should just say, where would you like it to go?
I would like it to be, this is a pat statement, but, peace on earth, it's the Christmas season. But I really think that, we have to get past some of the privilege that we as Americans have and see some of the more wealth and racial equity happening across and be around the globe. Now, do I see that, I don't know, 200, 300 years? Because, just there are some very different ideologies, even if in Russia and China, and, it's going to take a lot of work. But even if we start small and do it in this country, I think we need to do that. I think that's where we have to get to, accepting people as they are in their space.
Yeah, it's really interesting down here in Mexico. It's like a 20-to-1 exchange rate. And just kind of like looking at like the difference in labor cost, it's it gives you a glimpse of what it must be like for, I mean, a little small glimpse of what it must be like for like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Bill Gates and these people in America. Whenever you just have so much, it's really hard not to have an impact on kind of like the people around you, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I mean, how do we get to, I guess, a more equitable thing? It seems like there's some hazards with confiscating or taxing wealthy people. Um, and it seems like that there's some portion of, people needing to kind of make their own way and fend for themselves that needs to kind of be re-embraced as well. I mean, it seems difficult.
Well, so two things. One is, I think we need to get, and this is where Zoom's helpful, but people have to come out of their comfort zones and meet other people that are not like them. One of the great things about HP that I really enjoyed was the diversity of people there. My first exposure, for example, to a gay woman was at HP. But I was still 20 something, 25 before that even occurred. And so I think, people have to meet people on a one-on-one basis to help with that, I think, because until you actually know a person and know that they have the same values, they want to raise their family, they want to make a living, they want to, and I'm using they, but it could, it's not they, it's us. We all want to do the same thing, make a living, love our families, be kind to people. So I think we need to be reaching out to people more to get to know them. And the other thing I think we've kind of lost is, what's it called? It's our critical thinking. Our ability to read not just the news sources, and this is where social media is kind of bad, but not read the same resources that will take you down a certain path, but get a breath of it to try to understand the other side. And that, I've had several discussions with my sister about, with the pandemic and everything about, her news sources, even though she says they're balanced, when I research the news sources, I'm like, no. And so it's kind of like people don't read to understand, they just read to learn their side or support their thinking. And I think we've lost some of that critical thinking that people need to have in order to move forward.
I wonder how much of it is, trying to have a sense of identity. Like we used to identify with maybe our family or a tribe or a community, and now really it's kind of like these ideological tribes that we have, and people just want to kind of reinforce their membership and identity in like this larger collection of people, and it's really more about that than it is about the issues themselves.
That's a good analogy, because I do think, people are very afraid that they're going to lose something, whatever that something may be. It may be their cultural identity, it may be their job, it may be, I don't know what, but there's this fear aspect out there. And because of that, then that ideology tribe, I think, makes sense, because they want to be with people who think like them.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever watched SpongeBob.
No, I don't watch SpongeBob.
I with my, but there's like this one character, Squidward. He plays the clarinet, and he's kind of like a different character. But there's like this scene where he like goes on this camp and he's with a whole bunch of other people just like himself. Just that kind of popped in my head. Yeah. Well, I talked to somebody the day before yesterday here in Mexico City. Just met them on the street. Like, hey, can I talk to you about us going to the moon? And their big point was they don't think that in the future we'll be talking to each other, which is kind of echoing some of the things that you mentioned. Is that we're not. I mean, it's amazing. Everybody that I've talked to seems really smart, but have very different views of the world, and kind of operate to different facts. It's just like if you get them to maybe do some experiments or, say, put them on an island, say you don't know anything, can't research, can't reference anything. Could you answer these questions? How would you go about it? I think they would come up with some pretty interesting ideas. And so do you think the future seems more bleak than the present? Is it going to be worse?
So, okay, I grew up very much a pessimist. I start from that basis. So to be honest, I go both ways. Some days, I can't read the newspaper, I can't watch the news because it's just too awful. But I have hope yet, because there are people who are trying to make those connections. People want to make those connections. So I think, to the point where this guy will, he mentioned people will never talk. I hope we never, ever get there. I have hope that we won't get that far, that people will need to continue to talk, to learn from each other, to expand their thinking, to just make connections. Because if everybody's like me, it's going to be a very boring world.
I was just thinking being a pessimist is probably a strength for being a project manager.
I am a planner, and to be honest, my daughter's now in that project management world, and so it's like, oh no, I've influenced her.
Yeah. Yeah, the developer says we'll have it done tomorrow. You're like, okay, end of next week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Not, I need to get to know the person first, then I'll know. Okay, they live in that optimistic world. Okay.
Absolutely. Um, what are some things that we could do? I mean, I just think about all the people that I've had like really substantive conversations with, and it's like very few people, like in my family, everybody's like kind of set in their ways. So you, regardless of what the topic is, you kind of know what direction to go, and it's like the same conflicts. And then you really don't have like people, like where do people actually meet each other to have intelligent conversations? I don't seem to have a forum.
There was something, there was something I've read recently about how the neighborhood, something is in there. There are groups of people now starting to meet just to talk through things and to be this diverse thing, which I thought was really interesting, because you're right. I can't, for example, I can't talk to my family about some of these things, even though I have lots of questions. I can't talk to them because it immediately becomes, emotions come into play, and I'm looking kind of for more that logical, or at least not emotional discussions, right? So that I can do learning. But there's these groups that are started up, and supposedly they're national, and I can find the information if you want, about these groups that are starting just to have these discussions, and to
Yeah,
have them without being the emotional side, because you have to check your emotions at the door. There's rules about how they engage in these things.
yeah, no, I think that would be absolutely interesting. I would love to get that information from you.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I was thinking about having like a little cafe or something where you would kind of match people up randomly and have them talk about a topic, maybe something that wasn't a hot button issue, like uh, you know, um, the design of street lights or something. I don't know. Where I mean, because here in Mexico, they still have like the green, yellow, red, but like the green light blinks right before it turns yellow, and the red light kind of blinks a little before it turns green. So you have some clue that it's about to change, and then they have like the little animated person walking across the street signs with a countdown timer, so you know how long you have to go before you start running. Um, so it's kind of interesting. But do you think humanity will actually live in other places besides the Earth, or do you think humanity is destined to live only on the Earth?
Okay. I love sci-fi. So Star Trek, Star Wars, some of those things. I I think eventually we have to find another place to live, and there are probably something out there somewhere. Um, you know,
Seems like my
look for others
connection's
to live.
gotten a little bad. Um, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
That's better.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I think
Yes.
my internet went bad, and then Zoom crashed. So I didn't quite get your answer. So um, do you think humanity will actually expand beyond the Earth?
And I think, yes, eventually it will need to. I also expect that, we'll be getting into traveling space more than what we do now. I think it's just part of our nature to keep exploring. And I think the resources here on Earth are a little bit constrained, or you're limited is probably a better word. And yes, we probably haven't explored it all, but we're using it up faster than we should be. So I think we will need to be looking elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, to think about the material in the solar system, so little of it's actually on the Earth. You know, I mean, things that we think of as rare earth metals actually come from asteroids and meteors.
Use the have, mhm.
So, and have you seen the Netflix movie that just came out? Don't Look Up.
Yeah, I just watched it this weekend.
I did too. I thought it was hilarious. What'd you think about it?
Well, it was so we had a discussion on it because my whole family watched it, and it was funny and terrifying at the same time, because it was really, it was a comedy, but it was talking about how, some of our own ineptitude got in the way of us solving the issue. And, it talked about, again, some of the selected few that got off the planet, so it kind of was a elitist type movie, and everybody who couldn't ended up dead. So it was really kind of a commentary on the political world that we've seen in the last couple of years. So to me, for example, that night, all I could think about was an asteroid hitting the Earth. So it just was kind of, I don't know, it really struck me both from again, I got the comedy part of it, but it was like, whoa, what did you think?
I mean, lots of things. One, I mean, I think an asteroid striking the Earth and being devastating, even a small asteroid that hits the wrong part of the Earth, and somebody thinks that that's the beginning of war, could be very devastating, actually, because who's to, and even if it was an asteroid, I think there's some people out there that would think that certain countries would actually maybe manipulate asteroids to land on certain parts of the Earth as like a kind of a weapon type thing. So, I mean, from I thought several things. One is, I think the idea of an asteroid hitting the Earth having a significant world-changing event is a very real possibility. And I think there's several things that we should do to kind of minimize the impact of that possibility. One is education. I mean, every hour of every day, there are meteors hitting the Earth. Most of them burn up in the atmosphere. The ones that don't land in the ocean. The ones that land on land, their effects get weathered away and vegetation grows over them and you don't really notice it. But if you look at the moon, which doesn't have weather, you can see it's quite the firing range out there that we're in.
Mhm.
So I think education's a key part, both from a standpoint of, that big hole in the ground wasn't put there by a missile from so-and-so country. It was put there as just a random event. So,
Mhm.
we got that. The second thing is, NASA has actually just sent a mission called the DART mission that's planning to ram a satellite into an asteroid to see what the effect is on the asteroid, see if they can actually perturb its orbit. It's a very minor test, but maybe the first in a long range of tests that could both be good to like deflect an asteroid to keep it from hitting Earth. Sadly, though, it also plays into that whole thing of, well, if the asteroid does hit the Earth, maybe something changes its orbit so it would hit. So you got that. But then the third thing is, Elon Musk wants to build a million-person city on Mars, which would be, really a difficult, challenging thing. But, having a pocket of humanity with like, Noah's Ark type of a kind of a situation where you have representation of all of the life here on Earth in some other part of the solar system. That seems like a really good thing to do, because if something happened to humanity or life in either one of those two places, potentially you could kind of rebuild using what you had from the other place. So it would help to mitigate that risk. So that's what I thought about on the practical side. But the whole political thing, I mean, I think they were spot on about the way, it's all about, how can we turn this into votes for the next election type of thing, as opposed to actually dealing with the real issue.
Or
And
monetize it. Let's break it up now. So maybe we have multiple ones so that we can get the minerals coming through it. It's like,
I know, yeah. And I loved how they had the hotline to call a scientist, but you had to be using that particular brand of phone.
it's just, yeah.
And oh, he's a platinum level donor. He has full access.
Right. And so that's, to me, that's the pessimistic part, because I think the science and everything to me is in the right direction. But for me, it's all the political stuff that surrounds that is going to hold us back, I think, or at least cause more struggle than we need.
And if you look at the course of human existence, I mean, it seems like you have like the societies that start out with like the fundamentals, and then they start building these more elaborate house of cards on top of their existence. And at some point, it all collapses, and then we're back starting with first principles again.
Mhm.
So, but I thought it was funny and hilarious. I hear there's like a part after the credits that I missed. My son also watched. He's like, "Hey, did you see the part where he's?" So now I had to go watch that last little bit.
So yeah, well, because we watch Marvel movies, got us. We always check the end of the credits now because the Marvel movies all have the stuff at the end.
Yeah, I wasn't so disciplined, so I need to go watch the credits. Um, if it was safe and affordable, would you take a trip to space?
I don't know, because part of this is safe and affordable are kind of question mark words, in my opinion. But I'm just not a huge risk taker. I'm just not. And so like even bungee jumping, I have nope. Skydiving, nope. So there are things that I have no interest in, but I fly wherever I need to fly. Flying is not a big deal to me. And so maybe, but for me, it's so far out there now that I just don't know.
Yeah, I think before I started doing this project, I would have told you, yes, absolutely. But then as I hear other people kind of like reason through it and like their fears and stuff, I'm like, those are some good points.
And to be honest, okay, and I'll be blamed here. If I was, okay, 40 years younger, would I think about these things differently? Probably yes, because it'd be way cool. But given where I am right now, I'm like, maybe not.
It's kind of funny though, because theoretically 40 years ago, you would have had 40 more years that you'd be putting at risk than you have now.
Well, right. But at that point in time, you're, I don't know. What do I say? All right. Your body is younger, so you can handle the stresses more. Your attitudes are younger. When you're first growing up, nothing can hurt you, nothing can do that. You're willing to do anything because of just kind of where your brain development is. So things, you take more risks as a young person than you do as where I'm at now. So
Along the same kind of tone or philosophy, Oscar Wilde once said, "I'm not young enough to know everything." So kind of like that same.
and I always hope that I still want to learn, I still want to do these things, or I'm not ready to go into a nursing home, or I don't need support in that way, but I still want to do learning and do a lot of things like that. But I just to actually do some of these things, I don't know.
I know, yeah. I mean, plus it takes longer to recover. I mean, you break a bone whenever you're 10, within a month you're back running around on the playground. you do that whenever you're 60 or 70, you could lose half a year,
That's right.
you know. Um, yeah, I had a thought, a question. Oh,
But
yes.
one statement I have on that. So my what is she to me? My husband's, well, my father-in-law's second wife. What I learned as getting older, though, is you still get things accomplished. You learn to do them in a different way to enable you to, even though you have limitations, to still get them accomplished. Because I watched her do that. And that's what I really want to hope for me as I get older, is that, yeah, I may slow down and do other things, but if I want something done, I'll still get it done somehow.
I like it. But I missed the Apollo landings by 3 years. I was born in 1975, and the last time was 1972. I was wondering if you were old enough to have for that to have made an impression on you, the Apollo era.
I was a little bit too young for that, but like the Columbia shuttle explosion made a real impact there, because that happened, I was at 20 something at that time. So the shuttle launches and coming back and down, those were a big deal when I made much more of an impression there. The Apollo stuff, I was still a little bit too young.
Yeah, I think Challenger is the one you're talking about, the 1986 with the teacher in space. I mean, you're talking about really making a major impact on an entire generation. I mean, pretty much probably 80% of the schools had that tuned in, because it's going to be the first teacher in space, and it's during the school day. I think that made a big impact on people. What were your thoughts after Challenger?
Well, I'm glad, I was sad to see that program shut down. I didn't quite understand why they quit launching shuttles. Because to me, that was a way to, people were excited about it. People watched it. There were learnings there. You could hear about the tests and experiments that they were doing while they were up in space. So I was sad to hear that kind of quit.
Yeah. And, I think whenever it shut down in 2012, a lot of the people in Congress were very surprised too, because that decision actually was made during the George W. Bush time frame. But yeah, that's interesting. And I think a lot of people were surprised to see that we were having to send American astronauts to the International Space Station on Russian rockets. That was
yes,
quite a change of events.
Yes.
So, well, Kathy, I see this as a time capsule for people not even yet born to look back on our time and kind of see how we're processing these opportunities and challenges. And if you could imagine like your great grandchild on Mars doing a high school history project about what people were thinking right before we took those next steps on the moon, what do you think would be worthwhile to share?
I think I want them to look back or continue to think about the hope and the connection of people. Make sure that, that they understand that, relationships are important, people are important, and to not lose sight of the fact that, nature, the environment is all important, whether you be on Mars or here on Earth or wherever, that, that environment, wherever they live, is very important to make that connection to. Don't take it for granted.
I think that's a wonderful thought, not only for them, but for us today. Absolutely. Well, Kathy, I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for participating in my project. It's good to catch up.
Well, it's good to catch up. So thanks, Nathan. And I hope you're, today we're having a high of about 10, and I assume you're having a high of about 70 degrees.
It is. It's sweater weather in the morning, and it's t-shirt weather by noon. So
Okay, and we're in long johns. Not quite, but yeah.
I understand.
Well, I hope you enjoy your time, and thanks for reaching out. This was great. I love doing this.
Well, thank you so much. And okay, well, you have a good rest of your day then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.